Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Robert Allen, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Private Gemma Blanthorne. We warmly welcome the family of Private William Arthur Fraser, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Those requiring a seat, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private William Arthur Fraser. William Fraser was born on the 6th of May 1888 in the Melbourne suburb of Footscray. Known by his middle name Arthur, he was one of 6 children born to James and Eliza Fraser. He received his education at the local state school before moving to Tasmania, where he worked as a preacher. He later returned to mainland Australia and volunteered in the colonial forces for 4 years. He then returned to Footscray, where he gained employment as a clerk and became engaged to a local woman named Bella Ross. Highly religious and pacifist by nature, Arthur delayed his enlistment until 1916, following the death of his younger brother Wally, who was killed at Gallipoli. He joined the Australian Imperial Force on the 8th of March 1916 and was assigned to the 10th Australian Field Ambulance. On the 20th of June 1916, he embarked for active service from Melbourne on board the troop ship Runic. Private Fraser reached England in early August 1916. He spent a number of weeks training before embarking for the Western Front in November. On arrival, his unit was sent to the front lines around the Belgian village of Strzelecka, where the men were placed in billets for several days before travelling to the French village of Armentières, where they established 3 advanced aid posts. The winter of 1916 and 1917 was spent around the village, treating minor wounds and injuries, trench foot and influenza, at the newly established medical dressing station. As the Allies followed the German retreat to the Hindenburg Line in March 1917, Fraser's unit treated increasingly serious wounds. Later in the year, Fraser's unit was moved to Belgium, serving in the front lines of Ypres salient. His unit was first deployed during the 3rd Division's attack at Messines in June, where Australian units suffered almost 6,000 casualties. Another major battle occurred 4 months later during the attack on Broodsinder Ridge on the 4th of October, then 8 days later at Passchendaele. Hastily executed in torrential rain and mud, the 3rd Division suffered horrendous casualties. Private Fraser was badly wounded in the head, arm and thigh while stretcher bearing. He was taken to hospital in Bologna to recover and did not rejoin his unit until the end of November. He then remained in Belgium with his unit until March 1918, when the 3rd Division was rushed south to the Somme to defend a key Allied position during the German Spring Offensive. The enemy was eventually repulsed, having exhausted troops and supplies. With conditions becoming increasingly difficult on the German home front, it was clear that the war could last not much longer. On the 8th of August 1918, the Allies launched a major counter-offensive in the final attempt to drive back the enemy. 2 days later, the 3rd Division attacked the French town of Proya. As it advanced, it was bombed by a German aircraft before being halted by heavy German machine gun fire from enemy positions in the village. Assigned to stretcher bearing, Private Fraser was hit and killed by machine gun fire whilst attempting to bandage wounds in no man's land. When the battle was over, he was nowhere to be found. His best friend, Lieutenant Ken Campbell, searched tirelessly to find Fraser's grave, and later wrote to Arthur's family in Footscray, "How shall I write to you of him we love? For I have just come from his grave in the midst of a deep field of corn growing by the wayside. From early morning until midday, I searched the place where I heard he gave his life for others." A rifle pointing downwards was in the ground, and tied to it was a piece of cardboard with the name Private Cotterill on it. On the butt end of the rifle was Arthur's identification discs, and a little to the left of the foot was a board with his name written on it. I seem to think that while he was binding the wounds of Private Cotterill, a shell burst near him and he probably was killed instantly by the concussion, for I have heard that there was not a mark on his body. Forgive me that I cannot write more. We have been fighting day after day, and I am tired, body and soul. The best friend I shall ever have in life has gone ahead of me. He was beautiful in his life, but in his death was more beautiful still. I am sore grieved for our mutual loss, but proud, eh? Very proud of being his chum, and had he lived 100 years, he could not have done anything finer. Private Arthur Fraser was buried at Health Cemetery, France, beneath the simple inscription chosen by his grieving family and fiancée, "Greater love hath no man than this." He was 30 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private William Arthur Fraser, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years decay. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.